Have you ever sat at a family gathering and suddenly realized everyone was discussing your future as if you didn't exist? I was sitting there at a Thanksgiving dinner, listening to my parents decide my life with an envelope placed in the middle of the table, cash and a one-way plane ticket, not to help me, but to get rid of me quietly, neatly, so I wouldn't embarrass them anymore. My name is Lelia. I'm 29 years old, the failed child in my family's eyes. At least, that's what they thought. But the most painful part wasn't being looked down on. It was realizing this. They were only proud of me if I added value to their image. If you've ever been compared, dismissed, or treated like a burden in your own family, listen to this story until the end. And if you see even a part of yourself in me, leave a comment. You're not alone. My name is Lealia. And if you think Thanksgiving is a day for people to sit together and be grateful to one another, then my family has turned it into something else entirely. A courtroom. A place where I, the eldest daughter, am placed on the table like a side dish, so everyone can take a bite of disdain and nod in agreement. Yes, she really is a failure. That night, my parents' house in Portland was brightly lit. Warm yellow lights, a white tablecloth, the smell of roasted turkey filling the room as if trying to mask the poison in the words that would soon be spoken. The relatives were all there. Aunts and uncles, a few cousins I hadn't texted all year, and Chloe, my younger sister, sitting right across from me, her hand already resting on her phone the way someone rests a knife on a cutting board. I sat at the edge of the table. Not because there wasn't enough space, but because that's where I've always sat in this family, on the margins. The easiest place to ignore, and the easiest place to drag someone out when a target is needed. I looked down at my plate. Turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce. Everything looked perfect, abundant, beautiful. But I couldn't swallow a thing. My throat had been tight ever since I walked through the door. Not because I hate Thanksgiving. I hate the way they look at me every time I appear. That look is like spotting a stain on a white shirt. No one says it out loud right away, but everyone feels uncomfortable. My father was the one who started. He didn't need a script. He's been rehearsing this moment my entire life. He lightly tapped his fork against his glass. Just a small clink. But it made me flinch like the sound of a gavel striking before a verdict. The entire table fell silent. The kind of silence people create when drama is about to happen. When the whole family silently agrees. All right, let's see how she reacts today. My father looked straight at me, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. We think it's time we talked about your future, Lealia. I lifted my eyes. I didn't ask which future, because I already knew. All I heard in my head was one familiar sentence. Here we go again. My mother sat beside him, a smile glued to her lips. The kind you see in family photos. Stiff, proper, loveless. She leaned forward and slowly pulled out an envelope from her side. White. Thick. Brand new. It slid across the polished wooden table and stopped right next to my water glass. Light as a slap wrapped in silk. She spoke carefully, clearly, as if she were dispensing charity. Your father and I have talked, and we think you need a fresh start. A fresh start. In her mouth, it sounded like being saved. In my ears, it sounded like being exiled. I hadn't even touched the envelope yet when I heard a soft click. Chloe. My sister had lifted her phone. The screen lit up. A tiny red dot appeared in the corner. Recording. I looked straight at it, then at Chloe. She smirked, her eyes shining like a child who just received a birthday present. I understood instantly. She wanted to capture the moment I broke down. She wanted to save the clip of failed older sister gets kicked out of the family. If not to post online, then at least to laugh about later with her friends. No one at the table said anything about Chloe filming. No one told her, "Don't do that." No one found it strange that a younger sister was recording her older sister being put on trial in front of relatives. Because in this family, I am not the one who deserves protection. I took a deep breath. I placed my hand on the edge of the table. My skin felt cold. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed calm. A skill I'd spent 29 years mastering. Never cry in front of them. I asked quietly, evenly, "What is it?" My father didn't answer. He just nodded toward the envelope. "Open it." Forks and spoons froze midair. My aunt tilted her head slightly. My uncle took a sip of wine like he was watching a show. One cousin looked at me with that cheap kind of pity. Poor thing, but she kind of deserves it. I opened the envelope. First, a plane ticket. One way, Portland to Austin. Next Monday. Rigid. Final. Like an order. Underneath it was a check. The number hit me like a cruel joke. $10,000. My mother spoke immediately, in the tone she used when explaining things to a slow child. 10,000. That's more than enough for you to settle down in a new place. I held the check. The paper felt cold and stiff. $10,000. Not because they loved me, not because they wanted me to start over, but because they wanted to buy my disappearance, to buy peace for their image of a perfect family. My father continued, without hesitation. "You've been in Portland for years now, Lelia. That tech thing of yours, it's going nowhere. You're 29, living like a student. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing. Hearing that word from his mouth felt like someone had shoved a stone straight into my chest. Not a sharp pain, but a heavy one. The kind that forces you to sit still so you don't collapse. Chloe giggled. Her husband, Hunter, sitting beside her, smirked and shook his head, as if witnessing an obvious truth. Yeah, figures. I looked around the table. Everyone was watching me. But not with concern, not with worry. It was the look of a crowd watching a car crash, curious, eager, wanting to see just how badly someone could hurt. And that was when I understood it clearly. They didn't invite me for Thanksgiving dinner. They invited me for a ritual. The ritual of expelling the eldest daughter in front of witnesses. A ritual they could later retell with pride. We tried to help her. We even gave her money and a plane ticket. But she is still her. I tightened my grip on the check. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from something burning hot rising from deep inside me. A rage that made me want to stand up, fling the turkey platter at their faces, and scream, "Who gave you the right?" But I didn't. I swallowed the anger. I looked at my mother, at my father, at Chloe recording, at the entire table waiting for me to explode like fireworks so they'd have a story to tell. And I smiled. A small smile. Neat. Cold. "Thank you," I said softly. In that moment, I saw my mother's shoulders relax. She exhaled, like someone who'd just survived a PR crisis. My father nodded with satisfaction, as if he'd just taught me a lesson. Chloe looked disappointed. I saw it clearly on her face. She'd expected tears. She'd expected shaking. She'd expected begging. I gave her none of it. I folded the check neatly. I slid the plane ticket back into the envelope. I did everything slowly, calmly, as if I were accepting a gift. But in my head, one sentence kept repeating, like a war drum. "Fine. You want me to disappear? Fine. I looked up at Chloe one last time, straight into her phone's camera. Then I said, as if closing a play where everyone knew their lines, "I understand." And at that exact moment, I knew the most important part of this dinner was over. They thought this was a sentence passed on me. But I understood something else entirely. This was the sentence they had just signed for themselves. Because there was one thing, one secret, they didn't know. And that secret would soon turn their smiles into panic. The envelope was still in my hands as the dinner went on, as if nothing had just happened. My aunt started talking about the weather. My uncle asked if anyone wanted more mashed potatoes. My mother straightened her napkin, like someone who had just finished an unpleasant but necessary task. And me, I sat there holding $10,000 and a one-way ticket, understanding perfectly clearly they weren't giving me an opportunity. They were paying for my disappearance. My mother leaned toward me, lowering her voice, softening it in that familiar, fake gentle way. "Don't overthink it. This is for your own good. Austin is a nice place. Young, easy to live in. Perfect for your kind of person." Your kind of person? I turned to look at her. I wanted to ask, what kind? The kind that doesn't bring prestige? The kind that isn't pretty enough to show off to friends? Or the kind that makes the family look bad? But I didn't ask. I'd been asking those questions my entire childhood. And the answer was always the same: silence. My father nodded, as if reinforcing his argument. 10,000 is a lot. We're not abandoning you. We're still supporting you. But it's time you stood on your own 2 feet. I almost laughed. Stand on my own 2 feet? I'd been standing on my own since I was 18. Paid my own tuition. Paid my own rent. Worked 3 jobs at once just to survive. Meanwhile, they bought Chloe a car. Paid her private school tuition in full. Helped her find her direction. But in their version of the story, I was the freeloader. Chloe set her phone down and leaned toward me, her voice syrupy sweet. "You should be grateful. Not everyone gets parents who take care of them like this. A lot of people don't even have $10,000 to start over." Start over. She said it lightly, as if my life were just a game with a restart button. As if the years I spent hunched over a computer, pulling all-nighters writing code, living on instant noodles and cheap coffee, were just a failed level that needed resetting. Hunter, her husband, joined in, his tone condescending. "Honestly, I think your parents are right. Sometimes people need to be pushed out of their comfort zone. Maybe somewhere else you'll find some kind of job, more suitable. Some kind of job. Not a career. Not a dream. Just something that wouldn't embarrass them anymore." I looked down at the envelope. $10,000. Once, that amount would have been a fortune to me. Today, it weighed differently, heavy with humiliation. I remembered the past. The day I announced my startup, my father laughed out loud. "Who do you think you are? Steve Jobs?" The day I showed them my first product, my mother said, "Does it pay a salary? Have insurance?" These things are unrealistic. When I stayed quiet, they said I wasn't trying. When I tried, they said I was delusional. And today, they decided to buy my permanent silence. I took a deep breath. No one knew it, but inside my head, 2 versions of Lealia were talking. The old Lealia, trembling, wanting to scream, "You have no right!" And another Lealia, calm, cold, unfamiliar, whispered, "Take it. Let them believe they've won." I chose the second one. I folded the envelope, gently, carefully, as if it were something precious. "I understand," I said. "Maybe this really is what I need." The whole table exhaled in relief. My mother smiled with satisfaction. My father nodded like a judge delivering a righteous verdict. Chloe frowned slightly, disappointed that I didn't react more strongly, but then smiled again, convinced I'd been cornered. "See?" my mother said to everyone. "She understands." Understands. They had no idea I understood in an entirely different way. I understood that they had never believed in me. I understood that, to them, I was a failed project to be discarded. And I understood that. I had nothing left to prove to these people. I stood up, envelope in hand. "I'm going outside for some air," I said. "It's stuffy in here." No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. They'd already gotten what they wanted. Outside on the back porch, the cold Portland air slapped my face. I leaned against the railing, gripping the envelope so tightly the edges crumpled. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. A new email. Sender, my lawyer. Subject: acquisition finalized. Congratulations. I closed my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because if I opened them then, I was afraid I'd laugh too loudly. They just handed me $10,000 to start over. While in just a few more hours, $8.5 million would be mine. I imagined the moment they'd learn the truth. When that one-way ticket was no longer a sentence, but an escape. When this poisonous envelope became the bitterest joke of their lives. I went back to the dinner table. Still turkey, still polite laughter, still Chloe bragging about her achievements. But inside me, a storm had formed. They thought I'd been pushed away. They thought I was clinging to charity money to survive. None of them knew that. I was about to leave this table as the winner. And they, the ones who had just signed that poisoned envelope. I didn't need to look at the phone screen to know Chloe was still recording. That feeling, being watched, documented, turned into entertainment, was terrifyingly familiar. I grew up under that gaze. The only difference now was that today, it had a lens. I sat back down in my chair and placed the envelope beside my plate. My hands rested on my thighs, steadying them so they wouldn't shake. I learned this skill early in life. Never let them see you weak. Because every time I was weak, Chloe grew a little stronger. My sister, the family's golden child, sat up straight, chin slightly lifted, like she had front row seats at a performance. She didn't try to hide the recording. No secrecy at all. She wanted me to know. Wanted me to see myself being captured from my worst angle. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked, her voice syrupy and fake. "I'm just recording this for memories." Memories. A memory of me being paid to leave my own family. Hunter chuckled softly, leaning over to look at Chloe's screen. "That angle's good," he said. "The lighting's nice. Very authentic." Authentic. I looked at him. He immediately avoided my eyes. Men like Hunter are always like that. Bold when there's an audience, silent when confronted. My mother glanced at Chloe, as if she should stop, but she said nothing. She never did. My mother's silence was what had fed Chloe for years, giving her the sense that everything she did was permitted, as long as it didn't embarrass the family. And humiliating me? That had never been considered embarrassing. Chloe tilted her phone, moving the camera a little closer. I saw my own face on the screen, slightly pale, the warm yellow light exposing the dark circles I tried to hide. Suddenly, I remembered the first time Chloe ever recorded me. I was 17. That day, I received my acceptance letter to a state university, along with a partial scholarship. I ran home, heart pounding, and handed the letter to my mother. She skimmed it and said, "Okay, that's good." then turned to Chloe. Have you finished your homework? Chloe was filming a TikTok in the living room. She turned the camera toward me and laughed. Look at her, so excited. Then she posted the video with the caption, "Nerd Alert." It got a few hundred views. Chloe bragged about it to her friends. I learned something very early. My pain was her entertainment. Back in the present, Chloe cleared her throat and spoke like a host addressing an audience. Lealia's moving to Austin, everyone. Our parents are so worried about her. They're giving her money and a plane ticket. The table chuckled. I didn't. I looked at Chloe. Really looked at her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see my sister shining. I saw someone afraid. Afraid that if I wasn't the failure, then who would she be? Afraid that if I disappeared, but not in the way they wanted, the spotlight might turn on her from a different angle. Chloe, I said evenly, have you recorded enough? She froze. Clearly, she wasn't used to me saying her name directly. No softening, no deference. I was just... Enough? I repeated. The table went silent. My mother rushed in. Oh, come on! Don't be so sensitive. Your sister's just joking. Joking. A joke that had lasted nearly 30 years. Chloe lowered the phone, but she didn't stop recording. I knew it. I could still see the red dot. She shrugged, half joking, half serious. I think one day you'll want to look back at this moment. You know, when you hit rock bottom. Rock bottom. I almost laughed, but I didn't give her that pleasure. Yeah, I said. Maybe. Chloe frowned. She didn't understand. She was waiting for something else. A breakdown, tears, rage. She wanted a climax. But I wasn't following her script anymore. Hunter leaned toward her and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, she must be in shock. Shock? If they knew how many times I'd been shocked in my life, they'd be exhausted just counting. I remembered Chloe's birthday parties, balloons, multi-tiered cakes, rooms full of friends. My birthdays? A small cake, a few perfunctory wishes, then my mother saying, "You're grown now. You don't need all this." I remembered when Chloe got promoted. The family threw a celebration dinner. When I announced I'd successfully raised my first round of funding, my father said, "Don't celebrate too soon." I remembered when Chloe got her heart broken. My mother held her and cried with her. When I collapsed from exhaustion after working 3 days without sleep, my mother said, "You chose that path." And today, Chloe was filming my exile like a trophy. I set my fork and knife down, gently, deliberately. "You can record," I said, "but you should remember, a camera doesn't capture just one side." Chloe stiffened. "What do you mean?" I smiled, not a kind smile. A smile that makes people feel cold. "Nothing." I stood up. "I'm going outside for a moment," I said to my mother. "The air in here feels heavy." No one stopped me. In their eyes, my role was already finished. I stepped onto the porch, letting the sliding door close behind me. Laughter drifted from inside, as if I'd never existed. I leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. The cold wind stung my eyes, but I didn't cry. I thought about the video Chloe had on her phone. I thought about the moment she'd show it to someone. I thought about the moment she realized. This story didn't end here. Because that humiliation video, if it ever surfaced, wouldn't say that I failed. It would say everything about how my family treated me. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that. I went back inside and sat down again. Chloe looked at me with a strange expression, as if she'd just realized something had slipped out of its familiar orbit. I picked up the envelope and slipped it into my bag. Then I looked straight at Chloe and said slowly, Keep recording. Who knows? This might be the most important video of your life. She froze. And I knew, right then, that she had started to worry. I sat back down in my chair, but I was no longer in that room. The dining table looked the same. The turkey was still steaming. Laughter and conversation continued to float through the air. But in my mind, everything had shifted into another dimension. One where I was the only person holding a bomb, and everyone around me was still standing casually next to the detonator. None of them knew. Not my father, not my mother, not Chloe, holding her phone with that triumphant look on her face. They didn't know that just a few hours before I walked into this house, I had signed the final documents at my lawyer's office. Not a job contract, not a loan agreement, but the acquisition papers, the sale of my company, the thing I had quietly raised and protected for 5 long years. Deal value, $8.5 million. I remembered that moment clearly. That morning, Portland was drizzling. I sat in a glass conference room across from 3 men in tailored suits, representatives of the tech corporation acquiring my company. My lawyer sat beside me and slid the stack of papers toward me. "Just sign here," she said softly. I held the pen. No shaking, no hesitation. I signed my name, Lealia Carter, slowly and decisively. At that moment, 5 years of my life were given a price. 5 years without holidays. 5 years living on instant noodles. 5 years of being treated like a joke by my own family. All of it condensed into a number my parents could never imagine when they placed that $10,000 check in front of me. My lawyer shook my hand. "Congratulations, the deal is finalized." I smiled, but I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone, I didn't post online, I didn't share the news. Because I knew one thing very well. The people who underestimated you the most are the least deserving of knowing first. Back at the dinner table, my mother was talking endlessly about Austin. There are lots of opportunities for young people there. You can start over. Maybe you'll find something stable. Stable. I lowered my head and pretended to listen. In my mind, I saw my bank account, soon to hold a number so large that $10,000 would be loose change. My father cut in. "The important thing is to be realistic, Lealia. Not everyone is meant to succeed. Some people are born to be in the background." In the background. If he knew that the background character had just sold her company to the very corporation he admired in business articles, I wondered what his face would look like. Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I think you should be grateful to Mom and Dad. Not everyone who fails gets handed money." I looked up at her. In Chloe's eyes, I saw it clearly. She was enjoying this moment. She thought this was her peak, the moment her older sister was finally taken down in front of the family. She had no idea that this was only the silence before a tsunami. I gently clenched my hand beneath the table, not out of anger, but to hold back a smile. If I smiled, they'd find it strange. If I spoke, they'd call it delusion. And if I lashed out, they'd enjoy it. No. I chose the hardest option, silence, and letting them dig their own grave. My mother placed her hand over mine, just enough to signal we're family, but cold to the touch. "Don't be sad," she said. "Not everyone is born to do great things." That sentence used to hurt me. Now it only felt ironic, because inside my bag, my phone vibrated softly. A new email. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. The transfer will be completed within 14 business days. I thought back to 5 years earlier. The tiny rented room, the old laptop, the nights I sat alone, eyes burning from staring at the screen too long. I remembered the first time my software ran smoothly. I cried, not from exhaustion, but because for the first time, something existed that was mine, independent of their approval. I remembered failed funding pitches, rejection emails, meetings where people looked at me like I was a girl trying too hard. And I remembered clearly, I never once called my parents. Not because I hated them, but because I had learned that expecting anything from them only slowed me down. My father was saying something about family responsibility. Hunter nodded along. Chloe replayed a video on her phone, probably watching the moment I obediently accepted the envelope. None of them knew that the person they saw as a burden had already carried herself far beyond them. I looked up, one by one. I saw my father, the man who needed control. I saw my mother, who loved her children only when they made her proud. I saw Chloe, the sister who had never let me win at any game, not even the game of being the victim. And I thought to myself, you will know. Not today, not at this dinner table. But when the world knows. I stood up and picked up my bag. I'm going outside for some air, I said. My mother nodded, distracted. My father waved me off. Chloe glanced after me, suspicion flickering in her eyes, as if she was starting to feel that something was off. Outside on the porch, I pulled out my phone. This time, I opened the email. Acquisition finalized. Congratulations, Lealia. I closed my eyes. No tears, no trembling. Just one clear, undeniable feeling. I was free. They thought I was about to be pushed out of their lives. In reality, I had stepped into a different life a long time ago. I put my phone away and went back inside. The same faces, the same condescending looks. But I knew this was the last time they would ever look down on me. Because very soon, when the news broke, when my name appeared in headlines, when the number $8.5 million was spoken, they would have to look up. And by then, I wouldn't be there for them to look at anymore. Standing outside on the porch that night, breathing in the cold Portland air, an old truth surfaced with painful clarity. This Thanksgiving dinner wasn't the first time I'd been put on trial. It was simply the latest hearing in a long series of trials that had lasted my entire childhood. I had grown used to being compared from a very young age. I was the firstborn. Chloe came 3 years after me, and from the day she arrived, I learned an unspoken rule in this family. I had to try. Chloe only had to exist. The first time I realized this, I was 8 years old. That day, I brought home a math test with a bright red A in the corner. I still remember the pride I felt as I ran into the kitchen, holding the paper up to my mother while she was cooking. "Mom, I got an A." She glanced at the test, nodded quickly, and said, "Okay, put it on the table. Wash your hands before dinner." That was it. No hug, no praise, no, "I'm proud of you." Less than 10 minutes later, Chloe ran in, waving her paper, her voice high with excitement. "I got a B+. My mother turned fully toward her, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh my goodness, that's great!" She bent down, hugged Chloe, and kissed her forehead. "See? As long as you try, that's enough. You don't need to pressure yourself like your sister." I stood there, the A still in my hands, and for the first time in my life, I understood something strange and unsettling. My effort was expected. Chloe's effort was a miracle. In the years that followed, the pattern repeated itself with cruel precision. I got top grades. Yeah, that's fine. Chloe got average grades. You really surprised us. I won awards. Don't get arrogant. Chloe participated. It's brave of you just to try. Little by little, I learned not to bring my achievements home anymore. In middle school, I fell in love with computers. While other kids played with dolls or gathered to chat, I took apart my father's old desktop, learning how to put each component back together. In 8th grade, I entered the school's science fair. I built a simple robot from secondhand parts bought at flea markets. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I won first place in the regional competition. On the day of the award ceremony, I stood on the stage under bright lights and looked out into the audience. My parents weren't there. That evening, I asked, "Why didn't you come today?" My father replied casually, "Oh, Chloe had a soccer match. We thought that was more important. You understand?" You understand. I was always the one who had to understand. I understood that my success wasn't interesting enough. I understood that I wasn't the main character in this family. And I understood that if I felt hurt, it was because I was too sensitive. By high school, I stopped talking about school at home altogether. I excelled academically. I ranked first in my class. I was chosen to give a speech at graduation. During the ceremony, my mother complained the entire time. "Why is this program so long? It's giving me a headache." Chloe didn't attend at all. She was out with friends. That night, there was no celebration, no flowers, just one sentence. "All right, it's done. Let's go home." A few months later, Chloe got accepted into a private school. Not exceptional, but prestigious sounding. My parents threw a party, invited relatives, posted photos everywhere. And me, who earned a partial scholarship to a state university, was told, "You'll need to cover the rest yourself. It's time you learned independence." Independence. I had been independent for a long time already. College was when I officially severed my expectations from my family. I worked 3 jobs at once, studied by day, worked by night, graduated with honors. No one came. When I told my parents I wanted to start a tech company, my father laughed outright. "Who do you think you are? Steve Jobs?" My mother shook her head. "Why don't you get an administrative job? Something stable?" Chloe said, "Don't dream too big." That was when I stopped explaining. I didn't need them to believe in me. I only needed to believe in myself long enough. For the next 5 years, I turned abandonment into fuel. Every line of code was a response. Every sleepless night was a silent refusal to be what they thought I was. And today, at the Thanksgiving table, when my father said I had never accomplished anything real, when my mother placed that envelope in front of me like charity, when Chloe lifted her phone to record, all those memories no longer hurt. They only clarified one thing. They never knew who I was, and I no longer needed them to. My A grade back then was never acknowledged, but the $8.5 million today isn't for their recognition either. It is proof, to myself, that the child who was once overlooked grew up without needing them at all. If there is one thing my parents taught me better than anything else, it wasn't love. It wasn't trust. It was how to survive on my own. Because very early on, I learned a bitter truth. In this family, only Chloe was nurtured. I was the one pushed into the world under the name of character building. They called it fairness. In reality, it was selective neglect. When I was 18 and my college acceptance letter arrived, I placed it on the dining table with a small, naive sense of hope. "Mom, I got into a state university with a partial scholarship. My mother skimmed the letter, then set it down. Okay, what about the rest? I was hoping you and Dad could help a little. My father lowered his newspaper and looked at me as if I'd said something absurd. No, you're an adult now. You need to take responsibility for your own choices. Take responsibility. It sounded noble. But 3 years later, when Chloe got into an expensive private school, with no scholarship at all, that idea of personal responsibility suddenly vanished. They paid her full tuition, bought her a used car so she could get to class, rented her an apartment near campus. And me? I waited tables at night, worked as a teaching assistant on weekends, took extra shifts at the library. Some days, I fell asleep at my desk from exhaustion. Some weeks, I lived on instant noodles because I had no money left. I didn't complain. I didn't cry in front of them. Because I had already learned that. Complaining only made me look weaker in their eyes. Once, rarely, I tried. Mom, I'm working 3 jobs. I'm really tired. She sighed. Chloe's school is harder. She's under a lot of pressure. You're the older sister. You should understand. That was when it became clear. My exhaustion was an inconvenience. Chloe's exhaustion was something that needed protection. When Chloe called asking for more spending money, my parents transferred it immediately. When I said my old laptop, the only thing I needed for school, was about to break, my father said, "Make it last. Don't be demanding." I did. I pushed myself until I stopped asking for anything at all. After graduation, I didn't move back home. Not because I hated them, but because I knew that going back meant more comparisons, more questions. When will you get a stable job? When will you stop dreaming? I rented a studio so small that stretching my arms meant touching both walls. I pushed an old wooden desk against the window. On it sat my aging laptop, a few books, and an idea that only I believed in. That's where I started my company. No capital, no backing, no safety net, just me, and the fear that if I failed, there would be no one to return to. I worked 12 to 14 hours a day. Weekends didn't exist. Holidays were just regular days with different dates. Meanwhile, Chloe graduated. My parents threw a party, posted photos, proudly showed them to relatives. I sent her a congratulatory message. She replied with the emoji. When I tried, rarely, to talk about my project, my father said, "So you still don't have a fixed salary?" Chloe laughed. "Are you going to live like a student forever?" I stayed quiet, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I knew they weren't asking to listen. During those years, the hardest part wasn't the lack of money. It was knowing, deep down, that if I collapsed, no one would catch me. If Chloe failed, my parents would say, "It's okay, she's still young." If I failed, they would say, "See? We told you so." That was why I never allowed myself to fail. Not because I needed to prove anything to them, but because I wasn't safe enough to fail. Whenever I felt exhausted, I remembered being left alone at that award ceremony years ago. Whenever I wanted to quit, I remembered Chloe's pitying smile. So I kept going. Quietly, stubbornly, alone. No one knew that inside that tiny rented room, I was laying brick by brick for something far bigger than they imagined. And today, when my parents placed that $10,000 check in front of me, calling it their final help, I almost laughed. Because they didn't understand. They had stopped helping me a long time ago. And I had survived without them the entire way. $10,000? That wasn't rescue. That was a belated insult. But I still took it. Not because I needed it, but because I knew very soon, they would finally understand that the child they once neglected had built an entire world on her own. If that Thanksgiving dinner had ended at the table, I might have still kept one last illusion about my family. But no, the truth always likes to reveal itself after you leave the room. After dessert, I stood up and excused myself to use the bathroom. No one noticed. To them, my presence, or absence, had never really made a difference. The hallway in my parents' house was long and narrow. I walked slowly, my head still buzzing with their sweet-sounding poisonous advice. I planned to wash my face, take a breath, and return, just to finish my obligation. But as I reached the corner near the living room, I stopped. Because I heard my father's voice. It dropped lower, the kind of voice people use only when they're certain the subject can't hear. "That's it," my father said. At least she finally agreed to leave. My mother exhaled in relief. I was worried she'd make a scene. At least she knows her place. Chloe laughed, a very soft laugh, but sharp as a blade. "I told you, she didn't really have a choice." I stood frozen behind the wall. No one knew I was there. And because of that, no one bothered pretending to be kind anymore. My father continued, irritation seeping into his voice. Honestly, having her around always made me uncomfortable. Everywhere I went, I had to explain. "Explain what?" Chloe asked, feigning innocence. "That she's nothing." My father snorted. "People ask, 'What does your eldest daughter do?' What am I supposed to say?" My chest tightened. My mother spoke next, quieter, but not in disagreement. "I feel the same. At gatherings, everyone brags about their successful, stable kids. And me." She paused, then said the words that sent a chill through me. "I have a child who makes me feel ashamed." Ashamed. The word exploded in my head. Chloe chuckled softly. "Well, now that she's gone, it's a relief. At least I don't have to explain why she's still like that." "Exactly," my father said. $10,000 is more than enough. Honestly, I think it was too generous." My mother agreed. "I think so too. But if we gave too little, people would say we're heartless. At least now we can say we helped her start over." Help. That's what they called sending me away. I bit my lip to keep from breathing too loudly. My hands trembled, my nails digging into my skin. Chloe spoke again, her voice dripping with the contempt I'd known my whole life. "Honestly, having her at family gatherings looks awkward. My friends ask about her, and I don't even know how to introduce her." "Introduce her how?" my mother asked. "Well, she does some random computer stuff. No big company. No impressive title. It's embarrassing to even say it out loud." My father laughed. "Yeah, she's a disgrace." A disgrace. It felt like a slap across my face. Not because I was surprised, but because they finally said out loud what I had felt my entire life. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't family. I was a stain. Something that made them avert their eyes. A name that made them uncomfortable to mention. My mother added, calculating as ever. "As long as she doesn't come back asking for money. I don't want to be involved anymore." My father nodded. "If she spends it all and comes back, I won't open the door." Chloe ended it with the lightest, but cruelest sentence of all. "Don't worry. With her personality, she probably won't dare come back anyway." All three of them laughed, and I stood there behind the wall, unable to shed a single tear. Strange, isn't it? I thought I would be in pain. I thought I would break. But I didn't. What I felt was a cold, unmistakable clarity, as if the final door inside me had slammed shut. I used to ask myself, am I not trying hard enough? If I were more successful, would they love me? The answer was right there. It wasn't that I wasn't enough. It was that they never wanted me. I turned and walked quietly toward the front door. I took my coat and my bag. No one in the living room noticed. I opened the door. I didn't look back. The night air was cold. The wind was strong. But my mind had never felt clearer. In that moment, I understood. I no longer needed to prove anything. I no longer needed their approval. Because the only person I needed to protect was myself. And from the moment I heard them call me a disgrace, I knew I would leave not in humiliation, but in silence. And the truth would speak for itself. There is a bitter truth I learned that night. When people have already decided you are a loser, what they fear most isn't your rebellion. It's your calm smile of acceptance. After hearing the entire conversation behind that wall, I didn't rush into the living room. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. I didn't give them the dramatic moment they were probably ready for. The one that would let them conclude, see, she really is trouble. No. I chose something else. I went back to the dinner table, and I performed. When I walked in, my mother was the first to look up. She examined me the way someone checks whether a problem is about to cause trouble again. I smiled. A smile just obedient enough, just tired enough. I just stepped outside for some air, I said lightly. It was getting a bit stuffy in here. My father nodded, satisfied. Chloe looked me up and down, her eyes carrying that familiar fake sympathy I knew too well. So, have you thought it through? My mother asked, her hand resting on the envelope as if it were the only lifeline I had left. I looked down at it. $10,000. A one-way plane ticket. Now I knew exactly what it was. Not help, the price of my disappearance. I took a deep breath, then nodded. I think you're right, I said slowly. Maybe Portland just isn't for me. The entire table exhaled. I heard it clearly. My father straightened in his chair. My mother smiled with relief. Chloe curled her lips like someone who had just finished a movie with a satisfying ending. I'll go to Austin, I continued. I'll start over. I used the phrase they loved most, start over, as if I'd lived the last 29 years wrong. My mother reached out and took my hand, her voice softening in that artificial way I knew so well. I knew you'd understand. Sometimes accepting reality is part of growing up. Growing up. They always used that word when they wanted me to swallow humiliation quietly. I pulled the envelope back and carefully placed it into my bag. Thank you, I said. I won't be a burden anymore. That sentence made my father smile more than anything else that night. That's the right attitude, he said. Knowing your place is important. Chloe raised her glass, half joking, half serious. Good luck, sis. Austin should suit someone like you. Someone like you. I raised my glass too, clinked it lightly. Yeah, I said. Probably. If they had looked more closely, they would have noticed my hands weren't shaking. If they had been sharper, they would have seen there was nothing in my eyes that resembled defeat. But they didn't look. They only saw what they wanted to see. When dinner ended, I put on my coat and prepared to leave. My mother hugged me quickly. Loosely. The kind of hug reserved for a problem that has finally been resolved. Let me know when you arrive, she said. So I don't worry. I nodded. My father stood by the door. He didn't hug me, just patted my shoulder the way someone pats an employee who's about to leave a company. Try your best, he said. Don't come back too soon. That sentence should have hurt, but it didn't. It clarified everything. I stepped outside. The night was cold. The wind hit my face. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. In the car, I sat still for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, the envelope resting quietly in my bag beside me. I smiled softly. Not a happy smile, but the smile of someone who finally understands the entire board. They thought they had just pushed me out. They thought they had solved the family's embarrassment. And me? I had signed the company acquisition just hours earlier. $8.5 million. The money would arrive within 2 weeks. And the most ironic part? I would take that flight. I would go to Austin. I would accept the money. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted them to believe they had won. Because when people are drunk on an imaginary victory, they don't prepare for the truth. That night, back in my small apartment, I opened my laptop. The email from my lawyer was still there. Acquisition finalized. Congratulations, Lealia. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I whispered, unsure of who I was speaking to. Go on, keep performing. The final act is coming. Some truths don't need to be spoken. They find their own way to explode. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I was sitting alone in a small cafe in Austin. The sun was out. The air was warm. Nothing like the suffocating cold of Portland. I had just signed the lease for my new apartment, sipping coffee, pretending to be an ordinary woman starting her life over. Then my phone vibrated. Not one call, but many. My mother's name, my father's, Chloe's, even Hunter's. I didn't answer. I already knew what had happened. I opened the news app, and there it was. A bold headline. Cold, factual, emotionless, yet powerful enough to tear my old world apart. Portland tech startup acquired for $8.5 million. Founder Lealia named one of the industry's brightest minds. Below it was my photo, a professional shot. I was wearing a dark blazer, looking straight into the camera, calm, confident. Not a failed daughter, not a disgrace, but a self-made millionaire. I took a sip of my coffee. Bitter, but pleasant. My phone kept vibrating. This time, messages. From my mother. Lealia, what is this? Why didn't you tell us? Call me immediately. From my father. We need to talk. Right now, this is serious. From Chloe. OMG? Lealia, is this real? Why didn't you tell me? Call me back. Just 3 days ago, I was the daughter they paid to disappear. Now they were calling it serious. I laughed, not loudly, but genuinely. I turned my phone face down on the table and didn't reply, because I knew exactly what was happening back in Portland. I could picture it clearly. My mother sitting in front of her computer, rereading the article over and over, her lips trembling, not out of pride, but panic. My father pacing the living room, face flushed. The man who always believed he was a great judge of people, realizing he had been catastrophically wrong. And Chloe? Chloe was probably frozen in shock. She had once lifted her phone to record me accepting that envelope, planning to turn it into proof of my failure. Now she was the biggest fool in the story. I imagined her whispering to herself, "That can't be right. Her? $8.5 million? Yes, me. My phone vibrated again. This time, a voicemail. I played it on speaker. My mother's voice came through, shaking, fragile, nothing like her tone on Thanksgiving night. Lealia, I don't understand. Why did you hide this from the family? Do you know how proud we are? You really surprised us. Call me, please. We need to talk. I love you. I ended the voicemail. Love. A word that suddenly appeared once I was worth $8.5 million. Another voicemail. My father's voice. Tight. Urgent. Lealia, you shouldn't behave this way. Family is family, no matter what. Your success also comes from how we raised you. We need to discuss the future. There are things, financial matters, investments we should talk about. I closed my eyes. Less than a week. Just one article. And suddenly, don't come back became, we need to discuss things. I opened the last message. From Chloe. Long. Very long. Sis, I'm sorry if I said anything that hurt you that night. I really didn't know you'd accomplish so much. I always knew you were smart. You just never shared. I think we should meet. We're family. Family. I finished reading and set my phone down. In that moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt clear. Clear that they didn't love me. They loved the version of me that had value. Without the $8.5 million, I would still be a disgrace. I stood up and left the cafe. The Austin sunlight hit my face, warm, real. I took a deep breath. 3 days ago, they thought they had successfully pushed me away. Now they were losing their minds realizing this. They had just expelled the one person in the family they would never be able to reach. That night, I didn't call anyone back. I didn't text. I didn't explain. I opened my laptop, signed the final remaining documents, and scheduled a meeting with the bank. The money would arrive. My new life had begun. And them? They would have to live with a truth more painful than any accusation. They lost me before they ever knew who I was. I thought I wouldn't see them again so soon. But life has a way of testing the boundaries you've just built. 2 weeks after the article broke, I was invited to be the keynote speaker at a tech conference in Seattle. A large stage, thousands of people in the audience. I was used to that gaze now, the gaze of recognition, of respect. Not the scrutinizing, judgmental looks from my old house in Portland. I had just stepped off the stage, barely had time to take a sip of water when I saw them, my parents, and Chloe, standing at the end of the hallway, awkward, tense, like people who weren't sure they still had permission to exist in my life. My mother stepped forward first. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling as she clutched the strap of her designer handbag, the same kind she used to proudly carry to social gatherings. "Lealia," she said, her voice breaking, "I finally get to see you." I stayed where I was. I didn't move closer. I didn't step back either. "Is there something you need?" I asked. My voice was so calm it surprised even me. My father stepped in, trying to reclaim his familiar posture, the posture of a man who always believed he was right. "We need to talk," he said, in private. "I don't think we do," I replied. Everything that needed to be said was already said. At Thanksgiving. The air froze. Chloe lowered her head, then looked up again, tears in her eyes. "Sis, I know you're angry, but no matter what, family is still family." Family. A word that once bound me. Now it sounded hollow. "Family," I repeated, "doesn't call their own child a disgrace behind her back." My mother froze. My father went pale. You heard that?" my mother whispered. "Every word," I said. Not a single one missed. No one spoke. This silence wasn't contempt. It was exposure. My father broke it first. His voice rushed. "Lealia, you have to understand. We were just worried about you. The words weren't right, but—" "No," I cut him off. "You didn't speak wrongly. You spoke honestly." I looked straight into his eyes. "You thought I was a burden, something to be handled with money and a one-way plane ticket." My mother broke down crying. But you succeeded. We're so proud of you. You have no idea. Everyone is saying, "Stop," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was final. "You don't get to be proud." The words landed like a hammer. Chloe's mouth fell open. My father bristled. "What did you just say? No, right? We're your parents." "Yes," I nodded. "And that's exactly why you don't." I took a slow, steady breath. You weren't there when I needed you. You didn't believe in me. You didn't protect me. You didn't stand on my side, not once. You laughed when I talked about my dreams. You paid me to disappear. I looked at each of them. You weren't there for the journey, so don't show up at the finish line. My mother collapsed into a nearby chair, sobbing. "Lealia, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I truly am." I looked at her. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to be held by her. I only felt that it was too late. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. Doesn't erase the fact that if I didn't have $8.5 million, you wouldn't be standing here today. Chloe stepped forward. "I was jealous," she said quickly, as if afraid I'd walk away. "I was always jealous of you. But I didn't hate you, You filmed me when I was being humiliated," I said. "And if things had gone the way you expected, that video would already be online." Chloe burst into tears. I didn't comfort her. My father clenched his fists. "So what do you want?" he asked. "Do you want us to disappear completely?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "I want you to respect my boundaries." I met their eyes. No calls, no messages, no bragging about me, no using my name for your image. I'm not stopping you from living. I'm just not allowing you into my life anymore. My mother choked out, "You're really cutting us off?" I nodded. Not out of hatred, but because I spent too many years trying to earn a place I should never have had to beg for. I turned away. You chose Chloe. You chose appearances. I choose myself. I walked away. No one stopped me. Perhaps they knew. This time I wouldn't turn back. That night, alone in my hotel room, I looked out over the city. There was no anger left, no pain, only a deep, steady quiet. I hadn't taken revenge. I had simply stopped giving them permission to hurt me. And that was the greatest victory of my life. I didn't succeed to prove anything to them. I succeeded because I learned how to believe in myself when no one else stood behind me. Cutting ties isn't cruel. Sometimes it's the only way to save yourself. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and share how it made you feel. And if you want to keep hearing stories about boundaries, self-respect, and the journey of breaking free from invalidation, subscribe to the channel. Maybe, just maybe, this is the first step where you choose yourself again. Just like I did.